As we approach the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attacks on the United States, South Asian communities throughout the country are reflecting on the decade-long wave of fear and intimidation which they faced in the aftermath. During the week immediately following September 11th, 2001, there were 645 reported incidents of bias or violence directed toward Americans perceived to be of Middle Eastern descent. South Asians were highly targeted because of their appearance and were involved in 81% of the reported incidents. One of the most egregious hate crimes was the killing of Balbir Singh Sodhi, a turban-wearing Sikh and gas station owner in Mesa, Arizona, who was gunned down by Frank Rock on the morning of September 15, 2001. The Bush administration's Justice Department contributed to the fear-mongering and scapegoating by creating a profiling system, which targeted young men from South Asian, Middle Eastern, and predominantly Muslim countries. The so-called special registration requirements were eliminated in 2004, but the last of that program's provisions were finally dropped as recently as April 2011. Even though it's been 10 years since the terrorist attacks, hate crimes continue to occur against South Asians and Arab Americans. According to the FBI's 2009 statistics, Muslims are the second most targeted group because of their religion. With Los Angeles having the second largest population of South Asians of both Muslim and non-Muslim descent in the U.S., it's important to ask what the city's residents have experienced over the past decade. A town hall meeting organized recently by the South Asian Network to address the discrimination endured by South Asian, Arab, Muslim, and Sikh communities attracted over 150 people, as well as Congressmember Judy Chu, State Senator Lou Correa, and Assembly members Mike Eng and Warren Furutani. According to Mike Eng, many South Asians are still living with the lingering effects of racism and anti-Islamic fervor. Well, joining me in studio this morning is Manju Kulkarni. She is the Executive Director of the South Asian Network. Welcome to Uprising, Manju.
Thank you, Sonali.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, the government under President Bush had a pretty severe reaction, as I mentioned, to the September 11th attacks, going as far as singling out men from very particular, certain countries. And they pulled back in many ways since then. Under the Obama administration, it's hard to say whether things are better in terms of how the South Asian communities are targeted, or have they just sort of been institutionalized into other agencies, other forms? What do you think?
That's absolutely right, Sonali. We have seen increased surveillance of our community, and there actually are now policies which are called suspicious activity reporting policies that encourage individuals to use racial profiling. These are private individuals as well as government officials to use racial profiling to report and conduct surveillance on members of our community for what is often non-criminal activity. In fact, in LA, there's a program called the iWatch program that's been utilized by the LAPD to do exactly that on a local level.
And so the FBI has also played a role in both here in Southern California as well as around the country, attempting to infiltrate Muslim communities, but also to try to get people to snitch on each other, as well as to try to foment fundamentalism, if you will, and acts of violence. Have we seen that as a big problem here in Southern California?
We have. In fact, one of the examples that we've seen very close to us is a former board member of the South Asian Network was simply taking some photographs in Orange County when some individuals took down his license plate number. Then members of the FBI actually spoke with a number of his neighbors and also landlady to report that he had been involved in some rather dubious activities, and then the landlady even threatened to evict our former board member. It was only after members of law enforcement actually spoke with him and his partner that they realized that there was nothing amiss going on at all, and in fact they were just architecture buffs. But these are the type of things that we see on a daily basis in our community where, again, private individuals can just report folks based on their race or ethnicity.
So there's the government targeting, and then there were the hate crimes by individuals, by vigilantes. As I mentioned, in the aftermath of September 11th, there was a big series, a huge spate of crimes, particularly against people perceived to be Arab or Muslim, whether they were or weren't. Many brown-skinned individuals from South Asia were targeted. Has that waned at all? Has that rate of hate crime gone down?
Well, I think we're continuing to see a number of sort of lower level crimes, hate crimes in our community. On a regular basis, we know that taxi cab drivers of South Asian descent are often targeted by their customers, even, where they ask questions, are you a terrorist? Where are you from? What are you doing? And in one case, there was an individual who came to San after basically a customer had threatened him while in the cab and even urinated in the cab, and while making or engaging in hateful speech. When the cab driver called the police officer actually wanted to charge the cab driver instead of the customer, because of information again that he had gotten from the customer and not from the cab driver. So these are things that we see fairly often.
Tell us about the town hall meeting that the South Asian Network organized. Who attended this, aside from also members of government, elected officials, etc.? Did you get members of the community come out and talk about, because it's not easy to talk about these kinds of very emotionally charged issues?
We were very fortunate to get a number of members of our community, both individuals who are themselves South Asians, as well as a number of folks from the API community and also
Asian Pacific Islander.
Right, exactly, and the broader Southern California community as well. And really the hearing was an opportunity to provide a public forum for our community as a whole to take stock of the past 10 years, evaluate some of the things that have happened. And we specifically looked at issues that had the greatest impact on the daily lives of our community members, including surveillance, racial profiling, immigration enforcement, hate crimes, bullying, and workplace discrimination. And then what we chose to do is to mix with the community stories that were presented that day, also a number of policy recommendations, because we didn't want individuals to simply feel traumatized or frustrated by the experiences they had or the stories that they heard from others, but also feel empowered to speak up and know that there are actually solutions out there and solutions that we can work on together.
And I want to talk about that, but I want to play for our listeners a couple of excerpts of the testimony that was given at the South Asian Network Town Hall meeting. Harbakshish Singh is one of the people who spoke up. During his testimony, he described how he was accosted in an alleyway by a couple of guys who thought he was Muslim. But here's another excerpt from his testimony about him simply trying to attend his own graduation ceremony.
In 2001, I started high school. 2004, I graduated as a valedictorian. I graduated 6 months earlier, but I wanted to come to the ceremony. I want to partake in the ceremony because it's a huge thing, not just for myself, but for my family. And I was told by the school administration that I'm not allowed to take part in the ceremony because of my turban.
And that's Harbakshish Singh, who was speaking about his experience. So, Manju Kulkarni, you're the executive director of the South Asian Network. There are things that fall into the category of hate crime, and then there's just systemic discrimination, like Harbakshish Singh just described. Officials in various capacities, various agencies, and I'm sure even in the private sector, simply discriminating. It could be as simple as not allowing somebody to, or taking somebody off of a plane, or denying somebody a service, or in this case, denying a young man the right to participate in his own graduation ceremony as valedictorian. Do you still, is that the kind of thing that we're still seeing very prevalent?
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point, which is that there is, discrimination in so many different settings. One place we've seen a number of clients is in, private, from private employers not being able to wear religious, whether it's a headdress, a hijab, or also wearing turbans, and not being able to be at the front of the store, to being in public places.
Or even maybe get a job.
And absolutely not even to get a job in the first place. And so there are some policy solutions, including the Workplace Religious Freedom Act, which help to address some of those concerns.
So Shakil Syed is another person who had testimony during the town hall meeting. He's a well-known local activist, and he describes in this excerpt from the South Asian Network's town hall meeting his attempt to get the information that the FBI was collecting on him.
The first request was simply answered saying that we have no record on you. When we threatened to file a lawsuit, we got 18 pages. When we actually filed a lawsuit, we got 800 pages. Of the 800 pages, 80% of this is redacted. The 20% that is not redacted are pieces of information, including a public function like this where I was invited to speak, or where I spoke at a particular public event or an anti-war rally, or at a mosque, and so on and so forth.
Shakil Syed giving testimony at the South Asian Network's town hall meeting. Manju Kulkarni is the executive director of the South Asian Network, and she joins me in studio. Why would the FBI be collecting information on Shakil Syed, a very public and visible member of the community who's known for his activities against war, for peace, etc.?
Well, that's a great question. And I think, for SAN, looking at it as through a social justice lens, we want to make sure that folks understand that 9/11 has introduced what are some of the most problematic national security policies. And really, under the guise of national security, both federal, state, and local governments are engaging in widespread surveillance of members of the South Asian, Arab, Muslim, and Sikh communities. And there really is no reason, especially with an individual like Shakil, but so many others within our community, just going about their normal daily activities and finding themselves, just because of their race or religious background, being surveilled.
So let's talk, Manju, now about the policies that either are in place or that you would like to see in place to prevent both discrimination, to address issues of hate crime, as well as some of these overreaching government policies that tend to pick out South Asians.
Well, we do have a couple of recommendations. Specifically, we think the Justice Department should return to the 2003 FBI rules governing investigation of individuals based on race and religion. We also think that the FBI should commit to not sending informants into mosques absent some reasonable suspicion of criminal activity in the mosque. So those are two specifics. There are also a whole host of recommendations relating to no-fly list, and really, again, some of the racial profiling pieces.
What about the 2009 Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Act? Is that the kind of thing as well that your organization supports?
Absolutely. And I think in addition to that, we think that Congress should amend regulations related to the implementation of the Hate Crime Statistic Act to mandate that special data reporting collection include race, religion, national origin, ethnicity, gender,
so they
and
don't
age.
They don't collect that information right now?
No, they don't collect all of it at this time.
So what do you recommend now for listeners to do who are listening? It's been a decade since 9/11, and for South Asians and people who look Middle Eastern and Arab, etc., it's been a decade of fear in many cases. And, I also want to bring up the issue of how the South Asian Network over the last several years, in general, I think through its history, has been a network, has been an organization of solidarity. And I'm wondering how members of the South Asian community have sort of expressed solidarity or worked in solidarity with members of the Arab American community, because it's one thing to say, look, I'm not an Arab, don't single me out. another thing to say, well, you shouldn't be singling out Arabs either, right? Because South Asians may look like Arabs, Sikhs may look like, Arabs because they might be wearing a turban, although to somebody who knows what a Sikh turban is versus what a turban that somebody might wear in another Muslim country, you would know the difference. Do you see, because these sorts of issues can divide communities, right? Have you seen communities coming together?
Absolutely. I mean, we work in coalition with so many different groups, both within our community, which include the Sikh Coalition, SALDEF, which is the Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund. Also, organizations that include and also go outside of our specific South Asian community include Muslim Advocates, also CARE, and then within the API communities. I think it's so important, Sonali, to remember that these are not isolated incidents by any stretch. I mean, we know that over 60 years ago, there was the mass internment of Japanese Americans based on some of the same racial profiling and racial animus against the Japanese community. And so we work also in coalition with other communities of color because, similarly, I think this is part of the continuum that involves the Jim Crow laws, also the anti-immigrant sentiment that we continue to see today.
Finally, give out the website for your organization, and I understand you're having a Citizenship Clinic on September 10th.
We are. So our website is www.southasiannetwork.org, and we are having a citizenship clinic on September 10th from 9:30 to 12:30, and we encourage folks to contact our office if they're interested in pursuing citizenship. And I think what's important to us about that is that it's part of a larger civic engagement project, and we're really trying to find opportunities for members of our community to participate meaningfully in their local communities.
Well, Manju Kulkarni, I wish you the best of luck. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.